Together to give a warm welcome to Venerable Miao Guang, our guest speaker, Venerable Miao Mu, Deputy FBC for Guangshan, Singapore, and all venerable guests for tonight. Labaton. Let us all take a bow to Venerable Miao Guang. Fellow Dharma brothers and sisters, please be seated. It is my great pleasure to introduce Venerable Miao Guang. She holds many roles at Fort Guangshan. Venerable Miao Guang is Venerable Master Xing Yun's personal English interpreter and also a researcher in Fort Guangshan Institute of Humanistic Buddhism. Venerable is also currently Director of Fort Guangshan Department of International Affairs. Without further ado, Venerable, please.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Dear Venerable Miao Mu, and ladies and gentlemen, our representatives from BLIA, as well as all the young adults from the InterVarsity camp. Good evening and auspicious greetings to you all. Tonight we are joined by a variety of audiences who have come to this spiritual home. Maybe for different reasons, but I believe all for the same purposes. For example, our 70 or so friends from the InterVarsity have spent a whole day talking about how to cultivate while having fun. Okay? And this fun being defined by Venerable Zhiye as freedom for you and me. And to be unmoved by the inside and out. And to have that, oh, now I see and get it, ways of cultivation. And in the week before, we've also had an opportunity to discuss with a few friends, either from Malaysia as well as Singapore, on the threefold training. In other words, to discuss ways of how we can proceed down this path of Buddhahood in a joyful as well as an enlightening way. And so despite the haze that has been going on, I'm nevertheless very grateful for the presence of our friends today. Okay. Last Friday when I arrived at the airport, actually before we even took off, and so a message came from Singapore and says, we have a few masks ready for you. Okay. And so we weren't sure what was going on, so I said, oh, why do we need masks? And so they explained that it was the haze. And so I told Venerable Yoden, I believe that this is the first time in 15 years that I have arrived in Singapore without seeing a blue sky, which is an extreme rarity. Okay? And so in response to my comment, one of them turned to me and says, it's not us, it's Indonesia. And having that, I guess this person was very proud in the fact that, yes, Singapore has always remained a wonderful Pure Land for her residents, never having created that issue, despite the fact that we need to coexist with our neighboring countries. But after all, this is home for us. Okay? And so for the other Dharma activities, other than the haze, which reminds us of the air that we have, we come to this temple for Dharma activities that remind us of the wisdom that we live in. And this afternoon, I sat in the water drop tea house, just sipping a cup of tea. Then I discovered this table of families sitting next to me, a big family that moved about 3 tables together, really enjoying their afternoon, just enjoying eating vegetarian food. And on the neighboring table, there was another family. Yeah, celebrating the birthday of their child. Okay, each being very, very happy. And then on the outside, I could see a little girl and a little boy running around, screaming in joy. And then outside the window, I could hear the young adults from the InterVarsity practicing their team cheers. Okay. So I thought to myself, wow, this is extremely a wonderful home where people come and they each enjoy it in their different ways. And which particularly touched me towards later in the afternoon was when the family next to my table, after they finished their meal, they quietly got up and returned all the chairs and tables to their original position, and then quietly collected their plates along with their kids and children, each taking a cup and a plate, knowing that, okay, they can help return it to the tray station. Okay? And so if they don't love this place, if they don't regard this place as their home, they would not have done so. So it really, truly felt like a Pure Land to me. Okay. And so the Pure Land, as that we are mentioning about today, reminds me of the topic that I would like to bring you tonight. That is the Vimalakirti Sutra. Okay. So this being the 7th topic of the year-long monthly English Dharma talk, I wondered if the different topics of sutras have already given you some glimpse into what the Buddha lands look like. Yes or no? Maybe and maybe no. Or some of you may say, I already know what Buddha land looks like. It looks like this, right? A group of virtuous companions joining together and coexisting in harmony. But nevertheless, hopefully tonight and tomorrow afternoon, I will be able to also present to you the kind of Buddha land and wisdom that is laid out by Buddha, as well as one of his best friends, Vimalakirti. Okay. And so a little background information about the sutra. Okay. The Vimalakirti Nadesha Sutra, which originated in the Sanskrit term, means the following. If you look on the slides, you will see Vimalakirti obviously means the name of the layman. Okay? In Chinese, Wei Mo Jie Ju Shi, the very, very famous layman. And Nadesha, meaning instruction or device, followed by sutra, which means threads or truths that have been linked together. And together we have, in English, a sutra spoken by Vimalakirti. Or someone also translates it into the teaching of Vimalakirti. Okay, and the very famous Chinese text called Wei Mo Jie Shuo Shuo Jing. Okay, I believe those who read Chinese texts would not find this sutra a strange topic, okay, as a lot of famous expressions in Chinese actually originated from this particular text. Okay, let me give you an example. Have you heard of 天女散花? Okay. It's not just from the Dunhuang text where you have a lot of ladies wearing tights, wrap themselves around ribbons and sprinkly flowers. Okay. It's actually in the Buddha land that there are celestial beings who do this as a celebration of the Buddha's teaching. Okay. And there's another one that says, 随其心净则国土净. Okay. If your mind is pure, your land will just be as pure. Okay. We talk about these different expressions all the time, and perhaps tonight we'll also get a chance to talk about why and what it actually means in this text. Okay. And this title, being the Vimalakirti Nadesha Sutra, might vary a little from the traditional text which we have seen, which is usually that spoken by the Buddha. Right? Starting from, thus I have heard, 如是我闻，一时佛在哪里哪里，在做什么做什么. At one time, the Buddha was in a place doing this and speaking that. Okay, but the Vimalakirti Nadesha Sutra this time has a different protagonist or a different speaker, that is the Vimalakirti. Therefore, Buddha's teachings presented in a person other than the Buddha himself, but recorded as a sutra, is called a Buddha Vachana, which literally means the Buddha's words. Okay? But it's not the actual words of the historical Buddha, but having someone else to present his teachings in a different style. And nor is it preached in a manner entirely by the Buddha. And what's more about this text is that the Chinese version is written in a vernacular prose, which is a very popular literature that talks about the Prajnaparamita of the Mahayana tradition, which is presented in an extremely lively and inventive depiction of religious dialogue. It's very dramatic, it's very, very humorous, it's full of insight, and it also contains frequent eruptions of the miraculous. Okay, so it looks like a script, a playwright about this very extraordinary man who has a little fun with the so-called enlightened disciples of the Buddha, okay, breaking down their conceptual realizations to help them achieve one very important thing. And what is that thing? I shall mention this later. Okay, just a little more background information on the text. Okay. We know that the existing 3 Chinese texts are as followed. The first version, translated by Ziqian, a famous monk, called 佛说维摩诘经. And the second, which is the most popular, translated by Kumarajuva, 维摩诘所说经. Okay, when you read the Chinese, you see that it's written very smoothly and elegantly, along with Master Shen Zhao, who added explanations and annotations about this version. And later on, it came Master Xuan Zhang's version called 说无垢称经. Okay. Why? Because Vimalakirti itself actually means the name of purity, or the name of untaintedness. And so that is how we come about with the names 维摩诘经 or 说无垢称经. And then as this text gets passed into the West, it becomes translated into the English either directly from the Tibetan or from the Chinese. Okay. And some of the most famous version includes the 5 you see in front of you. The earliest being the one translated in 1972, Sutra spoken by Vimalakirti by Charles Luc. And then going into 1976, the very famous French Buddhist scholar by the name of Lamotte, who translated directly from the Sanskrit into the French. And then by Sarah Boyne Webb, who then translated the French into the English. Okay. Once again, another very well translated text. In 1997, there is a version by Burton Watson from Columbia University, and which has been praised as one of the smoothest philosophical presentations of the Vimalakirti Sutra. And then in 2000, the scholar by the name of Robert Thurman translated the holy teaching of Vimalakirti, a Mahayana scripture, once again really fully focusing on the philosophical aspects of the sutra. And so that is why you can also tell by the additional name that is being given in the title itself, a Mahayana scripture. Okay, although the actual title itself doesn't say so. And then in 2004, we have a version by John McCrae, known to be the American scholar who pretty much brought the teachings of Zen introduced the teachings of Zen to America. And so he, representing the Numata Center, translated along with the Sutra of Queen Srimala of the Lion's Roar and the Vimalakirti Sutra is the latest translation, which is also the version you're holding in your hand. Okay, I hope you'll have a copy of the handout, which includes quotes from the sutras, which we will be reading as we go along the talk. And now a little bit on the objectives of this teaching. Okay, we are listening to the teachings of Vimalakirti for a few reasons. First of all, to expound the Dharma door to inconceivable liberation. In Chinese, 不可思议解脱法门, which was attained by Vimalakirti. And thus, this text is sometimes also known as the Sutra on Inconceivable Liberation. And in the sutra, other than some parts being taught by the Buddha himself, it includes what we call a dialogue, or pretty much a debate, between the layman Vimalakirti and the Bodhisattva Manjusri on the importance of turning away from Hinayana and realizing the Mahayana path. It's like a reminder for you, self-enlightened ones, turn away from Hinayana and face the greater vehicle to benefit the better ones. And so in this, it tells us how lay Buddhists are encouraged to practice in their path down Buddhahood. And to talk about this from the philosophical aspect, it's also a reconciliation of dichotomies, where the dialogue between these laymen and Manjusri Bodhisattva, to the two greatest minds, actually becomes an attempt to put an end between separation, to put an end to the separation between men and women, sacred and secular, as well as samsara, and nirvana. In other words, they want to open the Dharma door to inconceivable liberation beyond what? Perceiving and conceiving. And when we read about this text, especially for monastics, it's also a chance for us to address the misunderstandings of Buddhism and Buddhist teachings amongst ourselves, even if some of us could be highly realized disciples of bodhisattvas. And by us, I mean you sitting there and everyone present. Okay. And just a bit more, when we look at the objectives of the teaching, okay, the purpose of this text is also to turn back the wheel to the original message. Okay, we need to look very, very straightforwardly to the words and their meaning. Okay, so we start to turn from empty words to concrete implementation, cultivating with fun. And we turn from the superficial ritual to what we call genuine practice. Okay, it's no longer just discussions or high-end debates. We want to know that this can be applied to our daily life. Last but not least, it's an emphasis on not just following the Buddha. 我们不是只有跟着拜佛求佛. We're not just praying to Buddha. We actually want to realize Buddhahood. Okay, so quite a noble and ambitious text presented in the perspective of a lay Buddhist. Okay? And so hopefully this text will be a suitable chosen topic for all of you, being the lay bodhisattvas, who may not necessarily choose the path of becoming a monastic, but while still holding a household life, can you still travel down this road? Okay, just as Venerable Jue mentioned to our young adults this morning, okay, a reminder not to scare you from coming to the temple. 学佛不一定要出家. You don't have to become a monastic. Okay, you can still keep your hair. You can still go to your favorite cinemas. And if you go to the pubs, yeah, go easy with those drinks. If you don't go with those drinks, okay, we're always very happy for you as well. So either way, whatever it is life that you lead, maybe perhaps today I need a discussion of Vimalakirti as a layman. Through some of his very extraordinary actions, we can also see, okay, this is what he wants to tell us. Okay. And as it's a very long sutra, it consists of almost 20,000 characters in the Chinese version, I would like to present this sutra through 10 questions. Okay. As we discuss each of these questions, I will also bring up stories from the text to give you an idea of what the text is about. But before I start, can I see a show of hands how many of you have read the Vimalakirti Sutra, either in Chinese or English? Okay, wow, it's a 0. Okay, that should make the job easier for me. Okay, so enjoy it. Okay. Now, question 1. As we open up this book, I would like to ask you, what is home? Okay. What is home to you? A home with air conditioning, free of the haze. When you open the fridge, there's enough ice cream and soda, or maybe a bottle of water that will quench your thirst. Okay? When you sit down, you can enjoy a book, or maybe love the presence of your family, and so on. Okay? Or it could be a home, which I have just described, that there are families, there are also teachers, there are also monastics who spend time in the same space in different ways while allowing themselves to enjoy the presence of this. Okay. Anyhow, whatever it is that you call your ideal home, to the bodhisattvas and the Buddhas, it becomes depicted as what we call the Buddha land. Okay. 人间佛国 for us, or maybe just 佛国 for the Buddhas. That is also why I'm asking this question, because the sutra opens with a chapter between the Buddha and the Bodhisattvas talking about what a pure land is. Okay, so therefore, question 1 opens up the door to the first dichotomy that we need to deal with tonight. That is, between purity or impurity. Okay. So basically, the son of the elder, along with a large number of bodhisattvas, turned to the Buddha and said, can you explain how we actually build a pure land? Okay. And so in the process, of course, Buddha would have explained, okay, in order to build a pure land, you bodhisattvas need to look at reality with a straightforward mind. Okay? In Chinese, 直心. Okay, how do you look at reality with a straightforward mind? Okay. Just 3 nights ago, when I was running the interpretation workshop, I also mentioned something of the kind. And then I asked them, if you need to listen to and look at everything with a straightforward mind, what happens when I tell you to 照顾脚下? Okay. Okay. In other words, mind your footsteps. Okay. And so some of them look down at their foot and go, 怎么照顾? Take care of my feet. Okay. And some turn to me and say, it means to live in the present moment. Okay. So I would say, yes, there are all correct interpretations, but going back to this practice of a straightforward mind, it means simply just to mind your steps so you don't trip. Okay? A very direct and straightforward instruction, do not trip by watching your steps. And then the Buddha went on to say, yes, you need to also look at reality with a profound mind. Okay? Don't just look at the surface, but look into the essence and the core. You need to also look at this world with a bodhi mind, the bodhicitta, okay, the commonly discussed aspiration for a bodhisattva who aspires not only to attain enlightenment, but also to encourage others to do the same. And so there are also the 6 paramitas, the 4 immeasurable states of mind, as well as the 37 factors to enlightenment and so on. And so Buddha said, basically you practice all of this, you also purify your mind, and then you will therefore become closer to your pure land. Okay, so as a quote from the sutra, you can see on a slide, Buddha's instruction, if a bodhisattva wants to win the pure land, he should purify his mind. And because of his pure mind, the Buddha land is pure. Okay, final line, 随其心净，则国土净. Because of his pure mind, the Buddha land is pure. Okay. When your mind is pure, everything you see will be pure. Okay. And having heard this, one of the Buddha's most wisest disciples, Sariputra, then turned to the Buddha. Okay, Buddha, you're supposed to also have a pure heart, aren't you? But why is it that your pure land, which is the human world, filled with so much impurity? Okay. Does it mean that your mind is responsible for the impurity of this land? Okay. A challenge by your disciple. Okay. You're talking about impurity, but why are you living in impurity? Okay. And Buddha's response is, no, in fact, everything is and always was pure. Okay. Nothing had never been impure because they have always been pure. Only it is not recognized as such due to our own limitations. Okay. And so he answered this by saying the quote, are the sun and moon not clean when a blind man does not see their cleanliness? Okay. The brightness of the sun had never decreased, even if the haze is there. But our eyes have been blocked by the levels of clouds, the layers of clouds and the haze, to stop us from seeing the blue sky. However, technically the blue sky never went away. Okay. This is what the Buddha wanted to say. Okay. And in the midst of the conversation, a Brahma, or a heavenly being, cuts in and says, yes, exactly. Uncleanliness is a projection of the observing mind, lacking impartiality. Okay. So quite a deep and profound opening dialogue of the sutra that kind of wants us to look straight to our heart and see, okay, what is it that we perceive and conceptualize? And are these things that we conceptualize actually real? Okay, so when you're walking home in the middle of the night, you pass a corner and then you see someone standing behind a tree with long hair. Okay, you will jump, right? You're gonna get really scared because you probably just came from a scary movie, The Ring, right? The lady without the face and the hair pulling down from her, her front and the white robe. Okay, that gave me quite a bit of a scare when I watched it while I was young. Okay, so that night I went to bed with the image of The Ring. And then unfortunately, I have a rather naughty sister. Okay, she waited until I fell asleep and came out from my room to go to the bathroom, wearing white robe, okay, and a black wig, scaring me. Okay, she actually succeeded quite well. Okay, But I believe I was afraid of, the image from the ring, not actually of my sister. However, at that moment, my concept of this scary lady became manifested in front of me. And so that is the question of, is what we're seeing really real? And once we are able to look into it with 直心, a straightforward mind or a profound mind, things become much more clear. Okay? And so for you brothers and sisters, don't do that to your younger ones. Okay? This could cause lifetime scarring. Okay? And being about 17 or 18, I secretly went into her room and turned up her radio, the volume to the highest, because my sister has a habit of turning on the radio as the first thing she goes back to school. Okay? And so having the volume turned up to the highest level, the blast actually gave her a scare. Okay? So that was my little revenge. Okay? Nevertheless, both of us were left with lifetime scarring. Okay? So purity of the mind is extremely important, and one of that being not to cause harm onto other people. Okay? And so going back to this conversation, okay? And so we are looking at a few expressions where the Buddha and the Brahma are saying, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Okay? As we know, there's a famous story about Zhuangzi who turns to his friend and say, "Oh, look at those fish in the pond. They must be very happy." Okay? And the friend turns to him and said, "Oh, you're not a fish. How do you know a fish is happy?" Right? And Zhuangzi turns back and says, "You're not me. How do you know that I don't know that the fish are happy?" Okay? Just because you don't know, it doesn't mean that I don't know. That's what the Buddha wanted to say. Okay? And so Buddha continued to reply Sariputta's question by saying, "Look, this land of mine has always been pure, okay, but appears filthy so that I can lead people of inferior spirituality to their salvation." Okay? People of different levels need to be communicated with different types of language. Okay? So if you had a 3-year-old daughter or a 3-year-old sister, when you want to tell her that broccoli is yummy, what would you say? You would pick it up and put it into your mouth and go, "Yum," right? You won't turn to her and say, "Oh, look, this is full of vitamin. It's going to be good for you. Otherwise, you're going to have hardened blood vessels. You're going to have heart disease, so eat it." I think she would start crying, right? So you speak to a 3-year-old girl with a 3-year-old girl's language. But when you turn to a university student, you will talk about the need to have a balanced nutrition. Right? But now, as you talk to an enlightened person about what a pure land is, the language then naturally becomes different. It could even become unnecessary. Okay? So that's why a lot of people say, yes, you have mind-to-mind connection. You don't even need words. Okay? Imagine if we can reach that state. Okay? But nevertheless, as human beings, we are still relying heavily on the tools of what we see and the languages that we speak. So knowing our capacity, the Buddha, in chapter 1, having said all of these, the man whose mind is pure sees this world in its majestic purity. Okay? Stretches out his leg, taps the ground with his toe. Okay? And the moment his toe touched this world, this land that is full of dirt and filth suddenly turned into an extremely wonderful, clean, and crystal and sparkling world. Okay? He then turned to these arhats and said, "Look, this is my pure land as I see it." Okay? But since you're unable to perceive that status, that's why I present my pure land in a world that you're more used to. Okay? Just as, that's sorry to say, pigs love their home, right? But we call it a pigsty. We don't think rolling in mud is comfortable, but pigs love them. Okay? Dogs like a corner that is permeated with their own smell. Okay? So human beings too prefer to call their home for their own reasons. And therefore, having said that, the Buddha then retracted his toe, and the crystal, the wonderful, the beautiful world turned back to the world as we see. And he goes, "Look, this is still the world you see, but my pure land has always been pure in the manner." Okay. First chapter, okay, a little dialogue between the purity and impurity of the world that we see, that is our mind, okay, to sort of get a glimpse into what we need to tackle, what lies ahead of us in terms of the relationship between the extremes. Okay. But if I keep going like this, I think it will be faster to just tell you to go to sleep, right? So knowing the skillful means of teaching the Dharma, the Buddha then stopped and gave the stage over to Vimalakirti. He says, look, I'm not the only one talking in this text, okay? I have one of my best friends who doesn't look like me, but could be just as wise as I am. And so therefore, as we start to go into the next chapter, okay, I have my second question. What happens when you grow up? Have you ever thought about what you will become when you grow up? Or for our senior elders in the front rows, by growing up, it could mean what happens once you become more and more experienced with your understanding and practice of the Dharma. Okay? In other words, what do you wish to become? Okay. Does anyone from this corner wish to become Lady Gaga in 10 years? I want to dance and sing. Okay? Wei Xing will probably say, yes, I want to become the next Michael Jackson. I can sing, I can create music, I can dance. Well, I'm yet to see you dance. Okay. Anyhow, you will always have a role model in your mind thinking, yes, when I grow up, I want to be like this person. Okay, so Buddha, also very, very compassionate and understanding, says, look, if that's what you want, let's give you a role model. And this model happens to be Vimalakirti. Okay, so can we all turn to page 1 of our handout to do a bit of reading on chapter 2 on who Vimalakirti is. Okay. And so chapter 2 opens up with an introduction of this very important character in the text, where it says, at that time, there was within the great city of Vaishali an elder named Vimalakirti. He had already made offerings to immeasurable Buddhas, deeply planting the foundation of goodness. He had attained forbearance of the non-arising of dharmas, and his eloquence was unhindered. He deported in the numerous penetrations and had achieved all the dharanis. He had attained fearlessness and had subjugated the troubling vengeance of the Maras. Entering into all the gates of profound Dharma, he was excellent at the perfection of wisdom. Having penetrated skillful means, his great vows had been accomplished. Okay. And the rest of this paragraph goes on to talk about the virtue and the characteristic of this man. Okay. But to look at who he is in a few simple points. First of all, we understand that Vimalakirti is an eloquent lay practitioner who was said to be as enlightened and as clear as the Buddha. Okay. And knowing him being the elder, he was one with all good roots, san gen, a root being a metaphor in the earlier texts, telling you, yes, once you sow the seed, if you have the good roots, the tree of Bodhi will be able to grow within you. What's more, Vimalakirti was a healthy and educated man who lived in Vaishali, India. Okay. And he was known as Bai Yi, or the white robe one, which means a householder or a jushi. Okay. Clearly, his role presents an alternative to monastic life. Remember, 学佛不一定要出家. But Venerable Abbot Jeten added another sentence. 如果你要出家, 你也很欢迎. If you want to become a monastic, you're also very welcome. Okay? Always covering both ends of the dynamic, non-dualistic, either or both. Okay? And so what happens with his character is that it provides an immense probability. The thing that he does is rather unhousehold-like. For example, he is celibate, but he appears to have children. He goes to brothels, but he's chaste. He's rich, but he's without desire. Okay? So we basically get an idea of the kind of lifestyle this householder leads. Okay? And going back to the text, we realize Vimalakirti is obviously the heart of the text. Okay? The entire story evolves around him. And he was said to have been a great bodhisattva in one of his previous lives, known as the Golden Grain Tathagata, who formerly lived in the Pure Land of Akshobhya Buddha, but chooses to return to this world in order to teach the stubborn sentient beings. Okay? As the sutra says, okay? Returns to this world. And so another famous quote in Chinese Buddhist saying, 倒驾持行. Okay, obviously, a bodhisattva is an enlightened being, but he or she chooses to delay his Buddhahood so he can return and come back to save us. Okay, so that's where Vimalakirti comes from. And based on the characteristics of his role, we know that he's one who does not give rise to aversion in this world. He doesn't say, oh, practice so you can be free from this world. He says, practice so you know how to live in this world. He's also one who does not fear life and death. He's already beyond it. He's one who does not fear authority or power, and he's one who does not fear formalities. Okay? One who has a brain and is willing to think will always make something possible. So he was of the kind. And last but not least, he's one who does not contradict. He does not create ironies. Okay? In the sutra, he's said to be one who breaks up these ironies. Okay? And so a little bit, a table to sort of show us the contradictions or the ironies he's supposed to break up in the text. First of all, he is a white clothing of laity, but follow the Sangha rules. And second, as a layman, he was rather unattached to what we call the three worlds of desire, form, and formlessness. He was a husband and a father, but led a pure livelihood. He was a householder, but avoided domestic sin. And he had jewels and ornaments, which are presented as his spiritual embellishments. And in public, you'll be able to see that although he behaves like a regular householder or a regular layman, but in reality, he was actually demonstrating how you practice the Dharma. Okay, for example, he eats and drinks normally, but he tells you that, yes, I am enjoying the flavor of meditation. He goes to gambling houses, but not for the purpose of gambling, but to teach and deliver people there. Okay? He also consults with heretics, but for the purpose of guiding them back onto the right path. Okay? And so the list goes on. You can really see the true intentions presented by this layman. Okay? And so if you know him well, perhaps this could be what you want to become, right? I don't want to shave my head. I like my hair, okay? But I like the Dharma too. Sure, you can have both. Okay? It's always easy to reconcile. You can always have both, said by Vimalakirti. A man who serves as an enlightened layman who can provide goals to how we practice accordingly. Okay? So this is about Vimalakirti. And now, question 3. My next question for you. Have you ever had those aha moments? Okay? If I was to say enlightenment, you'd probably look at me and say, oh, are you going to tell me what enlightenment feels like? Okay, unfortunately, I don't think I'm enlightened yet. Okay? But I'm enlightened to the fact that enlightenment cannot be talked about. So I turn it into an aha moment, which means, oh, I get it. Okay? I understand now. Okay? But whatever it is that you understand could be moments of enlightenment, okay? Depending on the different levels. As the Chinese says, when you have small levels of enlightenment, it is still enlightenment. And to reach the status of the Buddhahood, it could be the status of Buddha's enlightenment. But nevertheless, they were all like aha moments. Okay? So I'm asking you, what level of aha do you think you're at now? Do you think you're far? Do you think you're deep? Okay. This afternoon, we had a very intelligent young man who says, my greatest enlightenment is to become enlightened to the fact that I don't know anything. Okay? So that's an aha moment to you. Okay? Congratulations. Okay? At least you know where you are. Okay? But not all of us do that, especially for those who reach an advanced level of spiritual cultivation. Sometimes there's the danger of falling complacent. Okay? We become so satisfied with where we are, then we forget that there's still a lot that we need to do. And so what I mean by this question is, it's a question pressed forward by Vimalakirti to the Buddha's 10 major disciples. Okay. May we turn to page 2 of your handout? As this question leads us to chapter 3, disciples, starting from the left column of your handout. Okay. In this chapter, okay, having introduced Vimalakirti, okay, now the story is about to begin. Sorry about the slow start, okay? And so the story begins that we have a very wise man who leads a household life, who does extraordinary things, okay? But his main role is yet to be mentioned in the text. And so he starts chapter 3 by what? Falling ill, okay? Vimalakirti suddenly gets ill. He's an enlightened man, but he gets sick. And not only does he get sick, let's look at the handout. This is a moment when he gets sick. So it says, at that time, the elder Vimalakirti thought to himself, I am lying sick in bed. How can the world-honored one, he of great sympathy, not take pity on me? Okay? Asking for sympathy. I'm sick. Come visit me. Okay? Come call on me. Okay? And knowing his intentions, the Buddha realized what he wanted. So, as it continues, knowing that Vimalakirti was thinking, what he was thinking, the Buddha immediately told Sariputra, his disciple who's foremost in what? Wisdom. Go visit Vimalakirti and inquire about his illness. Okay? And so Sariputra's reply was, well, honored one, I dare not accept your instruction to go inquire about his illness. Why? I remember once in the past when I was sitting in repose beneath a tree. At the time, Vimalakirti came and said to me, O Sariputra, you need not take this sitting in meditation. To be sitting in repose. Sitting in repose is to not manifest body and mind in the triple world. This is sitting in repose. To generate the concentration of extinction while manifesting the deportments, this is sitting in repose. Okay, so you can see where Sariputra is getting at, right? Break yourself free from the formalities and the attributes of meditation. In the case of the sutra, sitting in repose. And stop faking meditation. Start doing real meditation. Okay? Imagine Sariputra being the wisest person who already has supernatural power. Someone says to me, okay, your power is not true power. Okay, start showing true power. Okay? He's going to start feeling really dumbfounded. Okay, so the conversation keeps going. Okay, due to limited time, I won't read the entire paragraph. But the end, how Sariputra reacted was that he fell in silence and was unable to respond. Okay? Sariputra refused Buddha's request to go visit a layman who was sick by presenting this set of excuses or reasons. Okay? And the story gets even more interesting. Okay? What happens when your number one on your list refuses to help you? You go to number 2, right? Good thing Buddha has a long list, okay? He has 84,000个弟子, okay? And countless numbers of bodhisattvas. So the sutra can go on and on. And now, the next unfortunate person becomes Moggallana, one who's foremost in supernatural powers. Okay? And having heard the request, Moggallana also said to Buddha, no, don't ask me to go. This man is too much for me. Okay? What happened? Moggallana tells the Buddha, once I was teaching the devotees about what Dharma is by telling them that, husband and wife become husband and wife because you owe something from each other in your previous lives. 你一定是冤家，你才会来结婚. Okay? And your children have come back to collect debts from you. You obviously owe them something, right? As an attempt to explain karma and cause and effect. And he would even tell lay people, don't turn your eyes onto gold because it's a poisonous snake. Okay, so once he was teaching that, Vimalakirti overheard him and came and said to him, how can you scare people away from the Dharma like that? This is not right. Okay, instead of telling them to give rise to aversion, tell them to love these parts of their life by saying, yes, you and your husband should show as much love to each other since you will be spending the rest of your lives together. And your children and son have come back to repay you something in return. 他们是来报恩的，不是来讨债的. Right? And as for gold or money, lay Buddhists should be encouraged to live a right livelihood. Okay? You cannot live without money, so go ahead by all means to acquire wealth or an income through right or proper means. So Vimalakirti says, this is exactly how you should teach the Dharma. Okay? Again, leaving Moggallana silent, unable to respond. Okay? And so that's why his second greatest disciple says, no, I don't want to call on this sick man. Okay? And so moving down the list, who comes third? Mahakasyapa, okay? The foremost in asceticism. Do you think he said yes? Nah, no way. Right? Mahakasyapa says, oh, I'm so sorry, because once again, this guy also caused trouble for me once. I was begging, and knowing that I have the habit of begging from poor people to help them accumulate greater merits, Vimalakirti came and said to me, telling me that you are not practicing Buddha's spirit of equality. You're biased, so be equal, show signs of equality. Okay, so Mahakasyapa was again silent and dumbfounded. Okay. Now, number 4 on the list, Sputi, foremost in realizing emptiness, Xu Puti, Jie Kong Di. Okay, the hero in the Diamond Sutra was defeated by this layman again for a similar reason, that he always begs from rich people to cause them to practice the act of generosity. Okay, so Vimalakirti says, you shouldn't pick. You should follow the Buddha's instruction and just beg by order. So you are not equal either. You don't have the spirit of equality. And so let's go down the list. Next is Purna. Okay, we're wiping out Buddha's 10 major disciples one by one. Okay, Vimalakirti, known to be the terrorist or the troublemaker, okay, the enlightened troublemaker. Okay? And so Purna, who is best in debating, he should be expected to defeat Vimalakirti's discussions. But even for Purna, once he was talking to some young bhikkhus about the way they should behave as a newly born monastic, follow the rules, relinquish themselves from all the connections from the world. And Vimalakirti came and said, what you're giving to them is only dirt and filth. What you need to do is to give them something like a sunlight or like the moon. Lead them into the grand ocean of the Dharma. Don't lead them into dead ends. Okay, so again, Purna felt quiet and was unable to respond. Okay. Now, Katyayana, foremost in spreading the Dharma. Okay. As we talk about Dharma, when people ask, okay, explain the Buddha's teaching to me, okay, even for myself, I would have opened the line by saying, the Buddha talked about dukkha, suffering. There's only suffering and nothing but suffering in this world, and that is why we're here. Okay. And so this wonderful disciple, Katyayana, also said the same thing. Okay, so Vimalakirti told him, look, don't scare people away from the path of Dharma. Instead of frightening them, why don't you tell them that, yes, we understand suffering for the purpose of developing a positive outlook on life. Okay? We need to cure the illnesses of suffering by joy and happiness. Okay? We need to understand that impermanence means that it gives us motivation to keep changing for the better. And so you're not teaching the Dharma in the right way. Okay? So there goes Katyayana. And so the list goes on. So in the end of the chapter, basically all the 10 great disciples became defeated. Okay? This is like an RPG game. Okay? Your best fighters now all defeated, falling off the ring. So what would you do if you were the Buddha? Okay. Do you have any more hidden soldiers you can send forth? Anyone? Who else do you think the Buddha can send? So remember, these 10 disciples are what we call arhats, right? So we still have an even higher level. We have a batch of bodhisattvas waiting aside. Okay, so of course Buddha knew. But going around these 10 principal disciples, what we see is what Vimalakirti had intended. That is, in the end, having all of them declining to call on Vimalakirti, they have pretty much subdued actions. Although not defensive, but they have been tamed, 降服了. Okay, they understood what Vimalakirti was doing, but was not able to respond accordingly. Okay? And so that is why most of them end up being dumbfounded or unable to respond. So moments when words like concepts fail the challenge. Meaning of the action, Vimalakirti has caused them to attain a very particular type of wisdom, Socrates' wisdom. Okay? Socrates, the world's greatest thinkers and philosophers. Okay? And what is that wisdom? They now know that they don't know. Okay? Socrates' greatest enlightenment, I now know one thing, that is, I don't know. Okay? Not knowing can also be a form of enlightenment. Okay, so chapter 3 closes with a group of defeated wise practitioners, leaving Buddha in the same dilemma. We haven't decided who can go. Okay, so starting to look around the crowd. Okay, if the young adults refuse to go, certainly I would turn to the adults, right? So Buddha turns to the adults, which are the bodhisattvas. Okay, it goes into chapter 4, but a similar situation is presented where most of the bodhisattvas mentioned in this chapter, be it Maitreya Bodhisattva, Mila Pusa, okay, the bodhisattva sitting outside there, he stood outdoor, being one who still refuses to go and call on Vimalakirti. Geez, who is this man? Why is everyone scared of him? Okay. And Bodhisattva Glorious Light, ruler of the world. Okay. By the name, you know that they are really in a supreme status, but none of them are able to respond to Vimalakirti's challenges. Okay. And so, once again, Buddha is still given the task of finding the right person. Okay. So, when the hero comes to the rescue, take a guess who ends up going. Manjushri. Okay. But do you think Manjushri was happy and willing to go? Yes or no? Come on, he's the bodhisattva of wisdom, right? He's supposed to know everything, to be wise in every way possible. How can anyone else come close to beating him? Right? Okay. Trouble comes. Okay, let's turn to page 2 on the bottom right-hand corner on your handout. Okay. Chapter 5. After all these refusals by the arhats and bodhisattvas, now Manjushri is given the task to come to the rescue. So Manjushri's condolence visit. Okay, so this is the time Buddha says, okay, no one else wants to go, so Manjushri, you better go. Visit this poor man. Okay? And in response, let's look at what Manjushri says. Bottom right-hand column. Manjushri addressed the Buddha. World-honored one, that superior one is difficult to respond to. Okay, this is a very difficult guy, Buddha. Please, okay, leave me alone. But he continues to say, he has profoundly attained the true characteristic, and he is good at explaining the essentials of the Dharma. His eloquence is unhampered and his wisdom unhindered. He completely understands all the deportments of the bodhisattvas, and he has entered into the secret storehouses of the Buddha. Okay? One wise bodhisattva. The best thing you can ever do to your opponent is to praise them. Okay? Make them happy. Okay? Take away the fight and the confrontation. Okay? So this is what Manjushri says. He continues for many more lines by praising Vimalakirti. Okay? But to say this, last line of the first paragraph, just above point number 2, this was his final line. Nevertheless, I have said all of this, but I still don't want to go. But nevertheless, I will accept your sagely purport and proceed to inquire about his illness. Okay, Buddha, he's a very difficult man. He's enlightened. I don't want to visit him, but since you told me to, I will go. Okay, final agreement. What happens after that? Remember before, whoever Buddha asked refused to say yes, right? But suddenly upon that moment when Manjushri says, okay, I will go visit this guy, all the 8,000 bodhisattvas and arhats says, oh, can we come? Can we come? Now they all want to go. Why do they want to go? Because they realize that when these two greatest minds clash, the dialogue is bound to be interesting. So they would like to witness that interaction of wisdom. Okay? And yes, indeed, it turned out to be a very interesting dialogue. Okay, it was a point when we need to think about, on the slide, a reality check on the meaning of emptiness, or voidness. Okay, two greatest minds discussing the most profound practices, but leading back to the possibility of putting this into reality. Okay, so if you can talk the talk, let's see if you can walk the walk. Okay, that's a challenge that they start to pose to each other. And so, it turns out, yes, The decision has been made. So Manjushri, accompanied by 8,000 bodhisattvas and arhats, visits Vimalakirti. Okay. And so at that moment, Vimalakirti immediately realized they are coming. He too was enlightened. So his response comes as follows. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if your friends tell you that they're coming to your house, what would you do? You will set up the house, right? You will wipe your table, move your furniture in a comfortable position, maybe prepare some drinks and food so you can make your guests comfortable. Okay? But being an extraordinary man, Vimalakirti did otherwise. Okay? He told all of his servants to leave his room and removed all the furnitures and turned his room into an empty room. Okay? So it's like, come visit me, but I have nothing in my house. Okay? Except for one bed for himself to recline on as the sick man. Okay? Now, beginning of a story of a very skillful demonstration of an insight into emptiness. Okay? I mean, if I was Manjushri, I think I would be very nervous and scared. I'm going to a room to visit a sick man, but there's nothing. Obviously he has some kind of hidden agenda. Okay? So going closer to the climax of the story, I have question 4 for you. Ladies and gentlemen, can X equal to Y? Yes or no? No, shaking your head, right? So X equals to Y does not sound like an acceptable formula, especially to you scientists and mathematicians, right? It simply does not work. Okay? But speaking maybe from the perspective of Vimalakirti, he will tell you, oh yes, remember I am a troublemaker. I am going to make it work. Okay? I'm going to make it work in your experience. Okay? So going into the next chapter, this is what happens. Okay? With numinous power, Vimalakirti empties his home of attendants and furniture, leaving only a single couch, upon which he reclined in his illness and welcomes Manjushri by saying the following. Okay? You have come with the characteristics of not coming. You see with the characteristics of not seeing. Okay? Going straight forward directly into the challenge. Welcome to my house. Thank you for coming, but in reality, you never came. Okay? Welcome to my house. Thanks for seeing me, but in reality, you're never seeing me. Okay? What in the world is he trying to say? Okay? Is he trying to confuse his guests? Maybe upon this moment, half of them would have turned around, and ran through the door, thinking, I'm not going to talk to this crazy man. Okay? But in this case, if we're among the 8,000 bodhisattvas, I think we'll be quite safe. Why? Because in front of us, there is Manjushri. Okay, let's see what he says. Okay, a very profound conversation thus starts. So if you say, you come, but you never came, you see me, but you don't see me. Okay, let's see how Manjushri responds. He says, if one has come, there is no more coming. If one has gone, there is no more going. Why? To come is to come from nowhere. To go is to proceed nowhere. That which can be seen is invisible. Oh my Buddha, what does it mean? Okay, I'm only more and more confused. Okay, come and go, seeing and not seeing. Okay, we are now being met in the form of characteristic. But in fact, our nature has never moved or changed. Okay? So the nature of Miao Guang being a monastic from Foguangshan stays in Foguangshan, but you see me. But technically, you don't see me because I'm not here. Okay? Am I making sense? If I am, you might be crazy. Okay? But what we're trying to say here is, yes, it's the true nature that never comes or goes. Okay? It stays in the same place. It doesn't get changed. It doesn't increase, it doesn't decrease. Just as said in the Heart Sutra, 不生不灭,不垢不净,不增不减. Okay? Neither arises nor decreases, neither increases nor decreases, and so on. It's neither pure nor impure. Okay? But it's exactly that characteristic that gives us a false conception of the self. Okay? Let's use the example of love. Is there anyone who grew up in the West, in America or in Australia? Well, no one, okay? So I will use myself as an example. I moved to Australia when I was about 12. Okay, I started to learn and grow up in a very different environment where people look different. They had blonde hair, they had tall nose, and they had blue eyes. Okay, and the way they expressed themselves was quite different. Okay, I came from a Chinese background where my mom never actually even said a word of praise to me. Okay? If I got a 96 in a test, my mom would say, "How come you didn't get 100?" Okay? But I'm sure she was happy. Now that I have grown up, I know that she was proud of me. But she probably wanted me to become even better. Right? But in Australia, the way it turns out was my friend got a 69 in a test. Okay? And so her mom turns to her and goes, "Wow, you have improved. You got 64 last time. Well done." Okay? A very, very different story. Okay? So whenever my friend, this Australian, left the house, her mom would always kiss her on the cheek. Okay? But for my mom, she would say, "Lunchbox is right there, don't forget." Okay? Same thing, right? Have a good day. Okay? And so let's use the characteristic of motherly love in this case. Okay? In the East, our moms pretty much, hit us all the time. Says, "You finish your lunch, right?" There goes the slap. Okay? But in the West, the mothers will hug their child and say, "Oh, don't worry about spilling the milk. You just clean it up." Okay? Same type of love. Or when husband and wife speak in the West, okay, when the wife is coughing, and the husband will say, "Oh, do I not have money for you to go to the doctor?" Okay? But in the West, the husband will say, "Oh, honey, are you okay? I can hear you sneezing, or it breaks my heart." Right? Such a big difference. Okay? But the husband in the West, "Do I not have money for you to go to the doctor?" Translation, "Please go to the doctor," right, to get better. Okay? Very, very different form. Okay? But in reality, what happens? In reality, the husband has never blamed the wife. In reality, he was showing his love. Okay? "I love you, but go to the doctor." Okay? But someone from Australia said, "Oh, I love you, it's breaking my heart, so please go and see a doctor." Okay? Achieving very, very different outcomes. And so what Manjushri and Vimalakirti are talking about right now is that exact nature which never changes, just like love. Though shown in very different way, you're never really seeing love, but experiencing love, knowing where it is coming from. And so we could say, yes, surely this conversation, as it goes deeper and deeper, it's like a display of the characteristics of illness by Vimalakirti as a skillful means for you to see, yes, the moment when you need to know the importance of curing yourself from illness is the first, what? See the illness itself. Okay, so technically the illness is never there, but you're seeing illness. That's what he's saying. Okay? And so the conversation goes on. Manjushri, having broken free from the previous conversation about coming and going, suddenly realizes that the room is empty. Okay? So for the super minds, this is how they talk. Okay? Manjushri asks, "Why is the room empty with no servants?" And for us, maybe we'll say, "Oh, our servant has gone on a holiday. Okay? We are buying new furniture." But Vimalakirti would say, "The countries of the Buddhas are all empty. Technically, the minds of the enlightened ones live in emptiness." So Manjushri says, with what is that emptiness emptied? Are you able to keep up? Okay, pay attention to the words. Vimalakirti says, this emptiness was emptied with emptiness. Okay? How can emptiness use emptiness? Keeping up? It is empty through non-discriminating emptiness. Can emptiness be discriminated? Discrimination is also empty. Okay, so where should emptiness be sought? Also in emptiness. Okay. So now let's replace why, emptiness with why. So anything equals why, right? So can Miao Guang equal to emptiness? Yes or no? Yes, right? For Buddhists, you would say yes. For non-Buddhists, you would say, "Are you crazy?" Okay? But nevertheless, let's think about this from the Buddhist perspective. So it's starting to make sense now that X can equal to Y, right? In nature, your characteristic is always the same. But when your characteristics appears different, you realize that it is still the same as that nature. Okay, so let's use a little equation. Okay, we're saying that yes, x equals y. Okay, so what we are doing is, what happens? Actually, I need to go back a little bit. Okay, let's go back to the part where they have that conversation saying that, yes, how do you empty emptiness in emptiness? Okay, what he wants to say is, yes, I would like you to now see the nature of my illness, to see what it really is. Therefore, he asks Manjusri by saying, can this illness be forborne? In its treatment, is it diminished so as not to increase? Okay, so can our false conceptions of emptiness be treated? Furthermore, what is the cause from which illness arises? Has it been affecting you long? And how will this be extinguished? Okay, how do you get rid of your illness? In other words, okay, having asked that by Manjusri, this is Vimalakirti's response. Okay, now, talking about the illness of the mind, in reality, where does our illness come from? So Vimalakirti says, from stupidity there is affection, and hence the generation of my illness. Okay? In other words, attachment, ignorance, therefore illness. Since all sentient beings are ill, therefore I am ill. If the illness of all sentient beings were extinguished, then my illness would all be extinguished. Okay? If the rest of you are never sick, I would never be sick either. But if any one of you gets sick, I become sick. Okay? What is happening here? Is this not the emotion of empathy displayed by a bodhisattva? In other words, compassion. Okay? Remember, the purpose of this text is to turn all the Hinayanists into the Mahayanists. Don't just look after yourself. Now it's time for you to pay attention to everyone else. Therefore, through Vimalakirti's illness, he wants to display the need for awareness in empathy. I feel other people's illness. That is why I'm falling ill. So the same goes to a bodhisattva. Okay? If sentient beings were all able to transcend illness, then bodhisattvas would not be ill. Okay? And he goes on to say, so therefore, from what cause does this illness arise? A bodhisattva's illness comes from great compassion, okay? From that empathy, feeling for all living beings. So now going back to the equation of x equals to y. Okay? Now, start again. Let's replace x with your own enlightenment as a bodhisattva. Okay? Imagine you're hearing Vimalakirti's words. You're now starting to realize, yes, you need to have empathy. Okay? So your own enlightenment becomes x. And so what if x is not equal to y? Usually, before you told me no, right? X cannot equal to y. Now, we are replacing y with the enlightenment of all living beings. So to say that my enlightenment cannot equal to your enlightenment, what happens now? Then my enlightenment cannot be true enlightenment. Okay, so when x does not equal to y, x does not equal to x either. Okay? So what do you need to do to turn x into an equivalent of y? To regard all the sentient beings' enlightenment as that of my own. So at that moment, x, your enlightenment of realizing that it's not true enlightenment, becomes the enlightenment itself. So x equals to y. Okay? So this might give you a moment to take in, but it's a really interesting equation for us to see whatever it is. Right? There's always that sign of equivalence between anything that comes from us and anything that comes from the rest of the people around you. Okay? That is what the Bodhisattvas wants to say. Okay? But think about that. And hopefully when you have a chance to go back to the text, you can also read about the actual conversation. Okay? And now let's keep going. Okay? That's not the only purpose which Vimalakirti fell ill. Okay? He had another purpose. Okay? Not just to raise your awareness for compassion. Next, he wants to talk about how illness, in fact, comes about. Okay? And so he tells Manjusri, yes, illness is without form and invisible. It is beyond the body or the mind. Okay? In other words, he wants to say that it's actually something of the four elements, 四大, okay? The four greatest elements, earth, the solid parts of your body, the bones, water, your blood, liquid, and air, the air that you breathe, and what else? Fire, temperature. What he wants to say is that, yes, our body is actually made up of these four great elements. And anytime they fall out of balance, you start to fall ill. Okay? You know, if the index of the haze goes beyond 1,000, when you fail to breathe, your body is going to start to ache, right? And so, but if your body becomes hurt, you will also have trouble breathing. Okay? Imagine somebody punching you in the stomach, right? Although your element of earth is being jeopardized, but you also fail to breathe for a little while. In other words, they are all connected. Okay? So once again, X equals to Y. So that's now you replace X with your illness, and Y being emptiness. That is the four elements. Okay? And so having realized that, you will no longer fall ill. So X does not equal to Y anymore. Illness no longer is illness. Why? Because it equals to emptiness. Okay? Little bit of a trick. But he's saying all of this to help us develop a healthy perspective regarding illness. Okay? When we think of illness, as Vimalakirti has reminded Katyayana not to present the Dharma in a negative way. He now says, okay, understanding that your body is made up of emptiness, therefore illness should not exist. Now this is how you should regard your sickness. He goes on to say, what you should do is speak of the body's impermanence, but not of relinquishing it. In other words, how do you coexist with your body? If you got a cut on your hand, or you have a lump, right? You're not going to chop off your hand. You will apply medicine, and you will wrap it up in Band-Aid and look after it. Okay? You will try to coexist it. So to leave our body is not such a simple story. But before we are able to really see beyond its emptiness, we may as well start to think about how we live with this body. Eating regularly, drinking water, and go to sleep at the right time to give it enough rest. So all of these very fundamental instructions goes back to Vimalakirti's intention in saying, yes, look after your emptiness well. Okay? Because you still have to live with it, because this is a moment when emptiness isn't emptiness. Okay? Speaking in riddles. Okay? And another instruction about illness is to speak of the body's suffering, but not of the joy of nirvana. Okay? Why? Why do we mention illness or suffering of the body more than ultimate liberation? Okay, to be reminded of the moment when your body could fall ill. Therefore, cherish your good health. Okay? And he says, speak of egolessness, but not of discounting existence of sentient beings. Okay? With a very famous cartoon in America, a man goes to the automobile shop and says, I'm here to pick up my car. Okay? And then the mechanic joins his palm and says, there is no car. Okay? Either you have been conned, he has taken away your car, or you have come across a very wise mechanic to tell you, yes, a car was never really a car. It means parts, right? It means something else. Therefore, X does not equal to Y. Okay? So think about that. I'm just going to speed up a little bit. Okay? And so what happens when a bodhisattva gets ill? Okay? Let's go a bit deeper into how the mind can have control over illness. Okay? And so Vimalakirti's instruction is to deconstruct the illness and its causes by saying this present illness of mine comes entirely from the false concepts, confusions, and afflictions of previous lives. There is no dharma that experiences illness. Okay? One morning you wake up with a sore throat, right? And so your friend sees you coughing a little bit and starts to say, oh, I think you're having a fever. Okay? Although you don't have a fever, but having been hinted that you probably have one, you now start to feel the temperature of your body rising and thinking, oh, I think I do have a fever. right? We've all done that, right? It's that same experience when we are being hinted. Or when you watch a movie, if you watch Lorenzo's Oil, right? When you go home, whenever you feel numbness in your hand, you start to think, oh, am I going to be paralyzed, just like the little boy in the movie, right? Because you have fallen into that hint. But nevertheless, it's all your own concepts that's creating that illness. So who is sick? And why would you get sick? Vimalakirti wants you to know that what gets sick is that provisional name called your body that is made up of a conglomeration of the 4 elements. But technically, they have no master. So simply let them be, but don't let them affect you. Okay, final instruction. The body has no self. The arising of this illness is entirely due to attachment to self. Therefore, one should not generate attachment regarding the self. Okay. And we can go on and on about all these interesting equations when x doesn't equal to y and x can equal to y. Okay. You can replace anything and still make it work that x becomes y in the context of emptiness. Okay. Treat it as a fun game. But remember that when moments you feel that life is beyond you, right? There are certain things beyond your control. Maybe this little equation can help you find a different perspective in life. Okay? And so we have about 10 more minutes left. My next question for you. Are there moments when small can become big? Is your son bigger than you? Are you bigger than your father? In height, you could be, right? But do you think this is possible? Can a grain of rice be bigger than the earth? Yes or no? Okay. Using your imagination or your knowledge of the Dharma. Some of you are nodding away. Some of you are, having a little knot between your eyebrows and thinking, how does this work? Okay. Yes. From the perspective of space, it's probably almost not possible. Right? How can small equals big? Okay. We are confusing the minds of scientists who rely solely on evidence and reality, right? But remember, this enlightened terrorist always wants to break down your concepts. Okay, so what happens in the story? Okay, it's not included in the text. I would like to go on to a second part of the same chapter where Manjushri visits Vimalakirti. So they're talking about all of this on emptiness, on what sickness can really be. Right? When you don't feel the sickness, you don't get sick, and so on. But remember, when the adults are talking, what are the children and young adults usually doing? We start to dream, right? If we cannot keep up with the conversation, we start a conversation of our own. Okay, so it so happened to be that Sariputra, who was present, wasn't able to really get into the conversation. So he focused on one thing. Look, we have such a large group of guests. How come you don't even have a chair in this room? Okay. Shouldn't you at least show the courtesy to offer a seat to your guest? Okay. Reading his mind, Vimalakirti says, have you come for Dharma or have you come for a chair? Okay. So feeling very embarrassed, Sariputra gruntingly replies, of course I came for the Dharma, what do you think? Right? He says, of course I came for the Dharma, I did not come for the chair. That's what he says, but with a grunting mind, right? And so not wanting to go back to the conversation between, X is not Y, Y is not X. Vimalakirti says, okay, fine. There is a world about the number of 36, about the number of sands, 36 times that of the Ganges away from us, far, far away in the galaxy, called the Buddha land of the characteristics of Sumeru, Xu Mi Xiang Fo Guo. And in that land, there are countless chairs. So if you want a chair, I will borrow chairs for you. Okay? So in a small room like this, using his supernatural power, Vimalakirti conjured up 32,000 chairs for his guests. Okay? But now, there's one more problem. Since it's a chair from the Buddha land, okay, the Buddhas and the heavenly beings appear in a much different dimension. Okay, they're said to be much bigger than us. And so each of the chairs is about 84,000 yojanas long. Okay. Now, how long is one yojana? A Sanskrit unit, which means about 20 kilometers. Okay. Can you imagine a chair that's 20 kilometers tall? But it's that times 84,000. That's how tall the chairs are. Okay. And so with the chairs being that tall, those who are bodhisattvas, since they have already traveled beyond the realities of duality, they each use their supernatural power to hop onto the chair. Okay, so all the bodhisattvas then ascend the chair. Now, I'm not doing this to comply with the story, I'm just sliding off the chair. Okay. Leaving the arhats in problem. Okay, it's the arhats who are not able to ascend the chair. Okay, so remember, it's always a skillful means to teach them a lesson. I don't know what Vimalakirti has against the arhats, but it seems like he quite likes talking to them. Okay, so he turns to all the arhats who were not able to ascend the giant chairs and said, "Now, tell me, what do you think is the reason that you're not able to ascend such giant chairs?" Dear arhats, any arhats in here who want to challenge the question? Okay. So Vimalakirti went on to say, it's because you still have the concept of big and small. Right? The moment you think something is big, you're not able to overcome it. Okay? So imagine you have to walk from this temple to the monorail station, but on a 40-degree day, right? So for a person whose mind is not fixated on the temperature, he would just keep walking despite the sweat and the heat. But if you walk out the room thinking that, oh, it's so hot, I'm going to die of the heat, it's so hot, I cannot get there, right? You'll probably give up 200 meters your way into the station. Why? Because your mind is so fully fixated on the concept. Okay? Those of you who practice meditation, you will probably be always giving the instructions, saying, oh, when you feel the pain in your leg, what do? Don't break your leg, of course. Just watch the pain, right? Don't fixate your mind on the pain. In other words, any moment that the concept gets locked in your mind, the rest of your body will respond to that concept. Okay, darkness, fear, okay, pizza, yummy, durian, yuck, only to non-Singaporeans, okay, and so on. Okay. In other words, your reactions become so ready to respond to the momentary conditions that sometimes you don't even know that, okay, you truly cannot have something like this. Okay. So the arhats too, thinking, okay, these chairs are so tall, how am I able to ascend it? Okay, so Vimalakirti comes to the rescue by saying, that's because you have the concept of big. Okay. Remember, a mustard seed can contain the entire Sumerian mountain. Right? A grain of rice can contain the whole universe in the fact that the moment you plant it, it absorbs the energy of the entire universe before it grows into a grain of rice. Right? So there's the water, there's the sunlight, there's the nutrition of the ground. That is why in a grain of rice, you see a whole world. And so the arhats too need to let go of that concept. But since they were not yet beyond dualities, so the layman says, okay, you're not there yet, but there's one thing you need to do. Bow to the Buddhas and ask the Buddhas who have dwelled in emptiness to help you ascend the chair. Okay, so being embarrassed enough, so these arhats turned to the Buddha and bowed to him, and they all ascended the chair. So now everybody is comfortable. Okay? It takes 1.5 hours for a party to get started. Okay? It takes a long time for the guests to decide whether they want to go. It takes a long time for the host to decide that he wants to offer chairs. Okay? So now that they're all seated, I am sorry, time is up. We need to stop. Okay? And so tomorrow we'll also talk about what happens once they all ascend the chair. Remember, Vimalakirti is no easy man. Okay? He's going to continue to cause trouble for them. And so the stories which we'll be talking about tomorrow will include the stories about 天女散花, okay? And also the celestial beings spreading rains of flowers, as well as this concept of how when men and women can equal each other, how women can be turned into men, 转女成男. Okay, so these are all very famous stories from the sutra. So hopefully you will be able to join me tomorrow afternoon and we'll finish the rest of the text. And thank you very much for listening. I hope you're comfortable in your chairs.
Okay, thank you, Venerable Ralph Guang, for sharing with us and let us know what we don't know about the Vimalakirti Sutra. However, I'm sure all of us still don't know what we don't know. So tomorrow we'll be back to learn more from Venerable Miao Guang. Let us all rise and give a departure of Venerable Miao Guang and Venerable Miao Yi.